Well, I have looked for the past 3 weeks for the kids. I'm going to look one more time. I think I can find them this time. You want to come with me? Let's go! Oh, hey, I didn't see you there. Just kidding, I did see you there. You were right there and right there. But hey, kids, you're at home, or you're at the beach, or you're on the space station, or you're in a submarine. I don't know where you are. And if you've noticed, I've looked all over this building. I've looked everywhere. I've overturned every rock. I've taken down every tile. I have looked in every air duct, and you're nowhere to be found. So right after this lesson, I am going to leave this building and I'm going to go out into the neighborhoods and I am going to find you. Kids, I don't know where you are, but I'm going to find you somehow. But before we go on that journey, I want to conclude the journey that we've been going on here at Kids Club. This year at Kids Club, we've been looking at 1st and 2nd Samuel. And 1st and 2nd Samuel tell us a lot about David, but they tell us different stories. There's been Hannah, Samuel, Eli, you remember Eli, Saul, Jonathan, Uriah, Bathsheba, David, Joab, Ishbosheth. There's been a lot of different characters in 1st and 2nd Samuel. So when you look at a passage in the Bible, look at the passage first, then look at what book it's in, and then lastly, look at how that book fits into the entire redemptive history. And so tonight, what I want to do right now, real quickly, is to look at these different stories and to see how these different stories point us not just to 1st and 2nd Samuel, but to something much more. You see, if you remember, 1st and 2nd Samuel begins with Hannah. Hannah prayed her great prayer. And when Hannah prayed, she prayed her great trust in her God. Her God would provide for her. But as you know, we need something more. And then, in our second week, we learn the word of the day was Samuel. And Samuel was the story of Samuel hearing the voice of God. How do we hear the voice of God today? We hear the voice of God through prayer, through reading God's word, through trusting in his Spirit, but we need something more. But in week 3, we learned the word of the day was Dagon. And Dagon is the false god of the Philistines that the Ark of the Covenant had been put in his temple. And we learned that the true God is weighty, is glorious. Dagon is vapid and means nothing. He's an idol. He's a false god. He's nothing. But the true God is weighty. And we learned from this story of Dagon that we need something more. In the next week, the word of the day was king. You see, they cried out for a king. We need something more. In the next week, our word of the day was Saul. Saul was the king that God provided for them. Saul eventually got puffed up like a balloon. And you know what happens when you get puffed up? You eventually fall. The next week, the word of the day was sacrifice. Saul was supposed to sacrifice everything to God. But Saul decided, maybe I'll just keep back a little bit for myself. And Saul ultimately failed. We need something more. The next word of the day was we finally meet the main guy, David. David's older brother, Eliab, was strong and handsome and good looking. David was just a scrawny little boy. But what we learned is that God doesn't look on the outside. God looks at the heart. And we see in all of that, we love David. David is a wonderful man, but we need something more. And the next week, our word of the day was Goliath. The story of David and Goliath points us to the fact that we are fearful and terrified, running away from our sin, but we need someone to come in and rescue us and save us. David came in and rescued the people of Israel. We need Jesus to come in and rescue us. We need something more. And the next word of the day that we learned is Jonathan. Jonathan was strong, powerful, good-looking. He got stuff done. He did what his father wanted him to do. He was a good son. But even though Jonathan was a son of Saul and a good friend of David, we know that we need something more. The next word of the day was wilderness. These were the wilderness years of David. David had fled from the kingdom because Saul wanted to kill him. And when David fled out into the wilderness, he knew God was his rock. You see, you and I sometimes are in the wilderness, and we need something more. And the next word of the day was end. It's a small word, and it tells us that 1 Samuel came to an end. And at the end of 1 Samuel, Saul and Jonathan also met their end when they died in battle. God hates death. He hates death, so much so that he sends his son Jesus to destroy death. You see, we have death, we have end in our life, and we need something more. The next word of the day is a really big word, maybe the biggest word we have, inconsolable. And you see at the beginning of 2 Samuel, David was inconsolable. He was so sad and grieving over the loss of Saul and Jonathan. David was so sad. You and I get sad many times in life. And when we get sad, we need to know that even though we are inconsolable, God is with us and loves us, grieves with us. His Holy Spirit supports us. You see, when we are inconsolable, we know we need something more. The next word of the day was succession. That's right, there was sort of what I call the war of succession right after the death of Saul and Jonathan. We know David was the anointed true king of Israel, but the people didn't know that. And there was Ishbosheth, one of Saul's sons. There was Abner, a general. There was Joab, and there was David. Life is a mess. Life is a mess, and we need something more. The next word of the day is official. You see, at this point, the war of succession is over. David is now officially the king of Israel and Judah. He gets Jerusalem. He builds a palace. He makes friends with people. It all becomes official. But David's not our king. Jesus is our king. David's not our king. We need something more. And the next word of the day is victory. And in the victory that David had over the Philistines and bringing the ark into Jerusalem, David got the victory. But no, he didn't. God got the victory. And David may have gotten the victory then, but we need something more. And the next word of the day is important. Important. Because I think I said this, I think one of the top 10 most important chapters in the entire Bible is here in 2 Samuel 7. And it's definitely, I think, the most important chapter in 1 and 2 Samuel. And in this, it's a conversation between God and David, in which God says, David, you are the king of Israel, but there's going to be someone after you who's better. There's going to be someone after you who can not just do this for Israel, but do it for the world. You see, your kingdom, David, is temporary. But my son, who will come from the line of David, Jesus Christ, will be king of his people forever. Always and forever. You see, David's kingdom was temporary. We need something more. And the next word of the day was shepherd. We learned about the kingdom of David over these many years that David was king. And over the kingship of David, he was kind to his people. He was victorious over his enemies. He was generous to his people. In other words, he was a great shepherd. And we looked at Psalm 23. The Lord is my shepherd. David is not our shepherd. The Lord is our shepherd. David was a great shepherd king. But we need something more. The next word of the day is Uriah. And in this story, we learned the horrible downfall. David was a wonderful man, a man after God's own heart, and yet he still was a sinner. David was a wonderful man, but he was a sinner. We need something more. The next word of the day, words of the day, were Amnon and Absalom. These were the sons of David, and there was consequences to David's horrible sin with Bathsheba and Uriah. And from those consequences, Amnon and Absalom fought and argued and did some horrible, horrible stuff. And David had to flee the city because they wanted to be king. And all of that, we cry out as things are horrible. We cry out, we need something more. The next word of the day is uncertainty. And it's actually the very first lesson that we did virtually through the camera. And in this story, we learned about Absalom falling and David coming back into the kingdom. And even though David now is the new king, it was a really horrible time for everybody. And David was horribly sad. It was continued consequences of his sin and the sins of others. And in all of this, we learn that life is uncertain. Life is uncertain now. Life is uncertain with David. But we need the certainty that comes with the cross, the certainty that comes with Jesus as he provides for us and loves for us. You see, life then and life now is uncertain, and we need something more. And the next word of the day was not really a word of the day, but an exclamation, and it was these exclamation marks. And they reminded us that as David came to the very end of his life, as he looked back on what God has done for him, he could see that the Lord was his rock. Friends, you and I need to see that God is our rock. You see, we have uncertainty and shifting sands all around us, and life is a mess, and sometimes we have enemies, and sometimes we do horrible things, and we are the enemy. In all of these ways, we need something more. And then, friends, the very last word of the day we had was not a word, but a question. Now what? Now what? You see, at the very end of 2 Samuel, as David has passed on and has died, we now ask the question, now what? The people of Israel didn't know really what was going to happen next. You and I don't really know what's going to happen next. But what we do know is that 1 and 2 Samuel reminds us that the Lord is our shepherd. Well, as we come to the end of 2 Samuel, 1 and 2 Samuel, we see the story of David go up and down. We see all these crazy things. And in all the crazy things, just like the crazy things in your life and in my life, and in all of these crazy things, we can cry out to God, help me. You are our shepherd. You see, now what is a question? And we need something more. But we've now come to the very end, and we've looked at, we've surveyed all these different things, and now at my feet lie all the shards of these different words of the day. When we look at them, we see that the great story of David tells us a little bit, but they don't tell us everything. There's something missing. There's something that we need even more. And as I look at these shards, I wonder what... I think I see something. Come here. Look. King David shows us Jesus. Hey kids, I am so thankful we've gone on this journey together all year where we've looked at 1st and 2nd Samuel. And the next time you look at 1st and 2nd Samuel, I hope and pray that you will be able to remember that King David was a wonderful man, but we need something more. King David shows us Jesus. That's worth us praising God about. And now to conclude our virtual kids club, let's go see if I can find where you are. Come with me. Oh, hi Kyla.
Hi, Mr. Brown. Why are you so sad?
Well, I've been looking for all the other kids club kids, and I've looked everywhere and I can't find them.
But they're right there. Mr. Brown, I'm right here.
I'm right here, Mr. Brown.
Mr. Brown, I'm right here. Mr. Brown, I'm right here.
We are right here, Mr. Brown.
I'm right here, Mr. Brown.
Mr. Brown, I'm right here.
Right here, Mr. Brown. Mr. Brown, I'm right here.
I'm right here, Pastor Brown.
Right here, Mr. Brown.
I'm right here, Mr. Brown.
Mr. Brown, I'm right here.
Mr. Brown, we're right here. I'm right here, Mr. Brown.
Mr. Brown, I'm right here. Mr. Brown, I'm right here. I'm right here, Mr. Brown.
I'm right here, Mr. Brown.
I'm Mr. Brown. Hi, Mr. Brown. I'm right here, Mr. Brown. Bye.
I'm right here, Mr. Brown.
I'm right here, Mr. Brown. Mr. Brown, we're here. I'm right here, Mr. Brown.
I'm right here, Mr. Brown.
I'm right here, Mr. Brown. I'm right here, Mr. Brown. I'm right here, Mr. Brown. I'm right here, Mr. Brown.
I'm right here, Mr. Brown.
Hi, Mr. Brown. I'm right here.